This is Christopher Kennedy. Going to put this on YouTube. So I've got a couple interesting videos on YouTube about wire spoke wheels. This is off of a 1969 MGB. It's a wire spoke wheel, and this is after it's been sandblasted. As you can see, you take the wheel off, you take the tube off, you have it sandblasted on the inside as well, because if you don't have it sandblasted, you're going to run into a situation where it's really, really rusty. I've actually got a good example over here. Now these are the materials used. Of course, you have your wheel. For working on your rear wheel, I'd go ahead and take off your drum, have that sandblasted as well. It doesn't cost that much. Most people in the area will sandblast the wheel and the drum at the same price, about $20. That's all it costs per wheel, so that's pretty affordable. It's actually the most expensive part of this project. You're going to need a heat gun because you want to get the metal hot before you spray it, and you want to make sure that the Ospho is completely dry. Of course, you want a mask because you don't want to breathe in the acid fumes and the paint fumes. And of course, after we have it sandblasted, we're going to need to wash it. So you're going to have a sprayer, and this is just distilled water or any type of purified water. Good well water should work. That just washes off all the sand. It's best to do this out in the sun. If it's very cold in your area, you don't have a lot of sun, then the heat gun's going to be a good option there for you. And of course, I have that little mini sprayer sitting next to it. The mini sprayer is for the Ospho. So the Ospho is our rust inhibiting primer. Basically, once we wash the wheel, we go ahead and this has already been etched with heat and Ospho. And as you can see, it's this kind of a darker gray. It's actually going to get lighter as more it dries. And then, of course, we're going to paint it with some engine paint, and that way it'll resist the brake fluid, the brake dust, and any oil and grease, gasoline and whatnot. So that'll give us a nice color. Also protects the wheel. Now, some people like to powder coat. I'd rather have something where I can touch up. Where the powder coating's nice, you have to completely disassemble things and tape things off, and it's just a big chore. Where this is pretty simple, and if we make a mistake, we can sand it. So, mask for safety, heat gun to treat the metal, to make sure the Ospho is adhered to the metal. We've got our epoxy for our wire wheel that will go here. I like the spray epoxy. It's going to probably take 2 cans. I have done it with 1.5 cans, so it really depends on how long you take in the process. So the faster you want it done, the more cans. So if you have a good 2 hours to spend on the project, you can probably get away with a can and a half, and you can coat the entire wheel inside and out. And also we have paper towels so that we don't handle the project. Now you can also use rubber gloves, but you got to remember that this Ospho will actually adhere to rubber and other types. I've felt it. The paper, it tends to absorb it, and I can just throw it away. So that's up to you how you want to do that. But remember, water to clean, Ospho to treat. Okay, and if we walk over here, I already have a wheel that is wet with Ospho. And as you can see, it's wet. It's got that shiny glossy to it. We don't want that. So, of course, I got some stuff on here, paint flicks or wood flicks, because I had it on a piece of board. It's very sticky right now. As you can see, it's really shiny. Where the problem you have, if you don't take off the wheel, you see all that rust? That's where your see my finger there? Yeah, that's exactly where the inner tube sticks out. So a lot of water accumulates here, and as you can see, it's very pitted. So you really need to get in there with that sandblaster and stop that. So the Ospho and the sandblasting will stop it from pitting. Also gives you a better surface to adhere to with the epoxy. And I can flip the wheel over, and you can kind of get an idea here. See how bad that was? Without the sandblasting and the scraping, we couldn't get it that nice. And then, of course, here's the inside of the wheel. So it looks really nice, but that sheen that's on there is not good for painting. We have to actually hit it with the heat gun because we are losing sunlight here. So we won't be relying on sunlight heat. And you can do that. Remember to wear the proper attire. You don't want to drip sweat on your project, or you'll have to start over. But this Ospho is really simple. As you can see, I take this little guy here, and I filled him halfway up with Ospho. Or actually, when the first treatment, we fill it completely with Ospho, spray the entire project, so you get it nice and tacky. Then you come back in, because you don't want to have a lot of this. You see that? You don't want that. So you'll have to come in with half Ospho, half water, and what we'll do is we hit that, and that kind of brings that up a little bit. You can also wet down a paper towel. Take a paper towel, you wet the paper towel down with the Ospho and wipe that off. Now remember to use a paper towel. I have a clean brush here that we can kind of get rid of that paper. Because if you have that on there when you're painting, guess what? It gets stuck underneath the paint, and it's a weak spot for so that the epoxy is not going to have that nice base it needs to stick to it. Now, of course, epoxy is not the end-all be-all, but it is a good paint to start with. I found that it feathers in nicely. It runs it's very thick, so it doesn't run that well. It doesn't run, which is good. But we have to get rid of all the shiny, or because the Ospho is not dry, the paint can't stick. Now, I did finish with the drum over here. I did get that nice and dry, and as you can see, I painted it, and it's looking really nice. That's, like I said, that's just a engine paint. It's not the end-all be-all. You can still scratch it and everything else, but it's a simple engine paint. You can buy it almost any auto parts store. So let me go back to the heat gun, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Right there, you can see it's kind of shiny. Hit it with the heat gun. You're not going to really hurt it. It is metal, so it's going to get hotter than this. But as you can see, it's starting to get chalky. That's what we want to see. We want it to be chalky white or a light gray. You can see the dark gray starting to fade. The more heat we apply, and what we're doing is we're hastening not only the drying process of the Ospho and water, but we're also we're basically having the acid etch into the metal faster, because we're creating a oxidation reduction, where phosphorus is going to replace. There's going to be a small coating of phosphorus over the top of the metal instead of rust, which is oxide. So this is Chris. I will continue this in the painting project here, but this is probably the longest part. Painting actually doesn't take very long at all. Painting shouldn't take you more than 20 or 30 minutes. Now you see that I have it upright, and that's actually on purpose. You don't want to try painting when it's flat, because what ends up happening, because when it's laying flat, it'll pull up on the inside here. Okay, it will also pull up in here, and of course it will pool up in the rim, the ridges. And we really don't want that. We want it to stand up, so that when we're spraying it from a good 6 to 8 inches away, we get a nice even coat across this. And we can actually see if we're overspraying, because it'll start to run a little bit. Don't get freaked out if it runs a little bit. Just walk away, give it 10-15 minutes to tack up. If it's a real bad run, I would go ahead and wipe it immediately. But you'll see when I'm painting here. But first we got to go through this process, and this is about a 30 to 45 to an hour process. This is the crucial process. If you don't get this right, you're going to get bubbles in your paint. Rim was able to cure for about 48 hours, maybe a little bit longer, with the Ospho on it. And as you can see, the longer you let it cure, the better coating you'll get. You also won't get the bubbles. Now from here, there's certain spots, if you can see it right in that area there, where we had too much Ospho, tried to get it off, wasn't super successful. So we'll just have to make sure that we paint that a little bit better. If you want perfect finishes, you can sand that off, but then you have to make sure you clean your surface really good. Here I'm not looking for perfection, but I'm looking to get it protected from the elements, because it will start rusting almost immediately exposed to water after Ospho. So as you can see, we're doing the inside channel, covering up a lot of these dimple rust, and we protect this from extra water damage. Come on in on this side. Of course, we stuff the lug socket area there for the spindle. Make sure you stuff that with a fabric or paper towel, something that's super absorbent. That way you don't get paint on the splines. But as you can see, it's coated really well. We got good sunlight right now. Clear skies here in Florida. Humidity is a little higher than I'd like in painting these. But I will leave some descriptions here on the YouTube video on how this is done. But this is white appliance epoxy. You can get this at any hardware store. What's nice about it is it's resistant to chipping. Also, it's scrubbable, so if you have to wash your wheels down the road, you can take a pressure washer to it. And as you can see, I'm using the caps here to keep it positioned. I got to wait a good 20-30 minutes before I'll roll it. I'll pick it up and actually spin it in the air, set it back down, and finish the other. This side here is not completely done from underneath. We have to go ahead and do that here. But as you can see, you can do this with a lot of patience. 1 can of the appliance epoxy run you about $7. Ospho is going to run you probably only need a quart of Ospho if you're only going to do the entire 4-wheel set, maybe 5 wheels. You'll have to go with 2 quarts or a gallon. That's going to set you back about $15 for a gallon, or about $8 for a quart of the Ospho. And of course, you want to use purified or distilled water in this operation. That way you get you can wash off the sanding after sandblasting. So to get the wheel sandblasted, each wheel is going to cost you about $25. So when you look at the overall cost involved here, we're looking at less than $50 per wheel. And I don't think that's bad at all, knowing that you're going to have a hard, durable finish. That if you do get chips or there is something wrong with the wheel once you mount the tire, like if we want to sand this down, get that in there and get a little bit better, just go out and buy yourself a $7 can of epoxy, and you're good to go, because it just feathers right over the top. You don't have to add any primer or anything else to it. The Ospho is the primer. But as you can see, got to go in there and clean up some of the spots that I couldn't get to because they were out of the way. And as you can see, the difference between the paint and the non-painted surfaces. I'm going to go ahead and hit that, and then wait another 30 minutes and check for the final touches. So you can see it came out really nice. I'm going to leave it out here in the sun. It's a nice day, and I doubt it's going to rain. It's going to take at least 24 hours for this to cure. Of course, we're going to have a little bit of overspray. As you can see here, we got a couple drips here and there. But all in all, it turned out pretty well. The more time you take, the better it'll come out. Total time on this project was about an hour and a half, so it's not too bad. The big thing is to get it sandblasted, get all the rust off of it. Make sure that you use Ospho. Make sure that the Ospho is cleaned off any if you get pools of Ospho in certain areas, that needs to be wiped off immediately. Or at least, you can see and hear, even when I had the problems with the Ospho, it doesn't look bad. So, and the Ospho makes a very good primer. So, remember again, epoxy paint and Ospho on your wire wheels, and try to take the tire off and get this all cleaned up in here. Because if you don't, you're going to have a lot of issues with rust. You're going to have issues with moisture getting underneath the paint. That's a problem. We're not done yet. The next thing is we're going to put some vinyl, 10 mil thick vinyl tape here to cover it up, so when we put the tube in there, it doesn't. We have our finished product, a epoxy coated wire spoke wheel, and as you can see, it's fully coated inside and out. As you can see, I didn't get those. I got those by putting that thing in there. It made sure that we didn't get these spines coated, because remember, grease is going to go through here and also the spindle as well. So now we have a Now we're going to line the interior of the wheel so that we can put a tube on the wheel. This is it's 10 mils thick vinyl tape. We're just going to apply that to the edge here, and then of course we have to make sure that we don't cover up our hole for our, if you can see my finger, you can't cover that up. So the things we're going to need for this: 10 mils, and I made sure it's, you can see it's rather thick tape, so it can cover quite a bit with one pass. We're going to go ahead and do 2 passes with this tape, and of course something to cut the tape with. Wrapped in twice and 10 mil thick vinyl tape. And you can see we opened a little hole there for our tube to go through. There's just little final touches that always need to be made, as you can see in through here. You know, that can be dug out, that can be cleaned up here. So there's always little final touches, and that's why I prefer paint over powder coat, because in this project here, powder coat really doesn't work. It gets in between here and pulls up, and then it doesn't really. And as soon as these start to bend, because there's different stresses, now your powder coat starts to chip off and people get upset. So in order to powder coat something like this, you'd literally have to take the wheel completely apart. Spoke by spoke would have to come out, and you'd have to put it all back together spoke by spoke, which then you have to true it, which is a lot of work. This way, don't see very many loose, if any, spokes whatsoever, so it's most likely really true. A little counterbalance weight when they go to put a tire on there will cure that issue as well. But then we have our vinyl tape. As you can see, it's never going to be perfectly, because it's coming down off this curve here. Now you can heat this type of tape up and get it to sit in there smooth, but no one's going to see this. This is going to be hidden by the tube and the tire. It's just there to make sure that the spokes don't poke a hole in the tube. This is Chris signing out.